Welcome back because this one gets wild fast. Microplastics, food as medicine, and cancer defenses. We are basically asking whether the body is more vulnerable than we thought, or way smarter than we thought. And honestly, both of those can be true, which is the annoying part. The body is never simple, man. What hit me first was the idea that cancer is not just random chaos. Like, tiny mutations happen constantly, but defenses usually clean them up. So the real story is not just bad luck, it is the defenses getting overwhelmed. Exactly, and that is a much bigger conversation than just one disease. Because if the balance is tipping, then everything starts looking connected. The microplastics part was the first gut punch, though. A plastic spoon worth of plastic in the brain is a crazy sentence. That is not the wellness trend I wanted. And the scary part is we normalized plastic touching everything. Cups, plates, containers, packaging, all of it looked harmless for years. Now it sounds like the body is collecting a receipt it never asked for. And the issue is not just presence, it is inflammation. That is the red flag, because inflammation is where the trouble compounds. The blood vessel stuff made it even more real for me. If plastic is embedded in artery lining and risk goes up later, that is not cute. 4 times the chance of a fatal heart attack or stroke is enormous. That is the kind of number that changes shopping habits overnight. But I also like that he did not turn it into total panic. He kept coming back to simple changes like glass and ceramic instead of plastic. Basically, stop eating like a picnic is a permanent lifestyle. No more plastic fork philosophy. The tea bag thing was hilarious and horrifying at the same time. He was like, wait, before you sip, that bag may be shedding microplastics. Tea really said, surprise, the cup is also the problem. And that creates this weird modern irony where something healthy still has a hidden downside. But his point was not never drink tea, it was be thoughtful about the format. Loose leaf, real ingredients, less factory nonsense. Which is funny because people act like the packaged version is somehow more pure. It is often just more convenient, which is not the same thing. The Earl Grey and matcha part was where the conversation got really fun. Earl Grey beating green tea in that angiogenesis research is a massive curveball. That is the kind of result that annoys every person with a health ranking spreadsheet. Because everybody wants the clean hierarchy and biology refuses to cooperate. It also makes the broader point that data beats vibes every time. And matcha is interesting because it is basically the whole leaf, not just a steep. So you get the full polyphenols, plus fiber, plus the shade-grown potency. That is why it sounds more like a dense medicinal food than a cute drink. And of course, he casually mentioned he invested in a matcha company. The man did not come here for neutrality. But I actually do not mind that, because at least he is honest about his enthusiasm. The bigger claim was not that matcha cures cancer. It was that food can strengthen the body's defenses enough to matter. Better immunity, healthier vessels, better DNA repair, less inflammation. That is a much more defensible claim than miracle drink nonsense. And then he tied it to stem cells, which is where it gets spicy. Cancer stem cells are basically part of why cancer can come back. So even after treatment, the comeback risk is what everybody fears. The purple potato detail was another one of those unexpectedly specific wins. Anthocyanins killing colon cancer stem cells in the lab is pretty incredible. The grocery aisle is sneakier than people think. But again, he is careful about saying lab findings are not identical to a cure in real life. That distinction matters because people love to jump straight to headlines, which is how every nutrition conversation gets ruined by exaggeration. What I liked was the gut health explanation because it made colorectal cancer feel less abstract. The gut starts in the mouth and runs all the way down, which people forget. And the colon sits at the end of a very long exposure trail. So if processed meats are repeatedly hitting that system, it is not surprising trouble shows up. A hot dog once in a while is different from building your personality around deli meat. That is a brutal sentence, but fair. And the young colorectal cancer rise makes the whole thing feel urgent, not theoretical. Then the angiogenesis explanation finally connected the whole ecosystem. Blood vessels are not just plumbing, they are part of the body's defense system. 60,000 miles of vessels inside one adult body is absurd when you think about it. That is like a whole hidden city of highways. And the vessel lining has to stay smooth or everything starts sticking where it should not. That ice rink analogy was actually perfect. It made endothelial damage sound like bad maintenance, which is weirdly memorable. I also liked the balance point, because the body does not want zero vessels or too many. That Goldilocks idea is basically the whole story. People hear anti-angiogenic and immediately think, wait, are you starving healthy tissue? And his answer was pretty clean. The body regulates that naturally. So the point is, support the system, not smash it. Basically, do not become your own bad drug trial. The food as medicine experiment was maybe the strongest part intellectually. They literally put foods into the same system used to test cancer drugs. And foods showed real anti-angiogenic effects, not just some fluffy nutrition talk. Green tea, onions, garlic, strawberries, red grapes, all of it showing up on the chart. That is such a powerful shift because it makes food feel like active biology. Not magic, just chemistry with consequences. And it is cheaper and faster than waiting a decade for a drug. I think that is why the argument lands so hard. Then the family story made it impossible to stay detached. Losing the uncles and seeing his mother go from stage 4 to cancer-free changes you. Especially when the treatment was immunotherapy plus diet support plus radiation. And the result was dramatic enough that it felt almost unreal. Stage 4 to 0 is the kind of outcome that stops a room. But he did not frame it as a universal promise, which I respect. He framed it as proof that waking up the immune system can work. And that maybe diet can make the body more ready for that fight. Which is honestly the most useful takeaway anyway. That is where we will leave it for today, because this episode got deep fast. Next time, we get into how those immune-boosting strategies might keep getting smarter. Episode 3 is where this starts feeling even more futuristic. Welcome back, because this one goes straight into food, defense systems, and cancer. And somehow it also turns into microplastics in your brain, which is terrifying. I know we started with tea and ended up in a medical horror movie. But the core idea is wild. The body is fighting tiny mistakes all the time. And cancer shows up when those defenses stop winning enough. That already feels less random than the way people usually talk about it. Exactly. And he kept saying the balance is getting tipped against us. Not because our bodies changed, but because the environment did. That part hits hard because it means the inputs matter a lot. Especially when he started talking about microplastics like they were everywhere. Brain, bloodstream, breast milk, testicles, semen, all of it. Basically, the plastic industry got a touring visa to the human body. That is a horrifying joke, but also, unfortunately, kind of accurate. The brain example was the one that really messed with me. A plastic spoon's worth in the average brain is insane to even hear. And then the credit card a week thing just sounds offensive to the nervous system. Offensive to the nervous system is actually a great way to put it. But I like that he did not oversell it as the sole cause of cancer. He was careful to say it is a clue, not the whole answer. That distinction matters because otherwise people hear one villain and stop thinking. The practical advice was almost annoyingly simple, though. Throw out the plastic cups, the plastic plates, the plastic spoons. Which is rude to the entire modern picnic industry. Seriously, he made glass and ceramic sound like elite biohacks. And then he went right after tea bags, which felt personal. Imagine getting betrayed by the tea bag in your own mug. That is the most elegant betrayal possible, honestly. The weird part is that something healthy can still carry a hidden problem. Green tea is good, but the bag itself can shed microplastics. So the ritual can be healthy and the packaging can be the villain. That is modern life in one sentence. And then he took the same logic into ultra-processed flavorings. Like, buy the ginger, buy the lemon, do not trust the factory romance. Factory romance is a brutal phrase, but I get it. The part I actually loved was that he kept returning to control. Not panic, just reduce exposure where you easily can. Exactly, because the goal is not perfection, it is fewer unnecessary hits. Then the tea conversation got strangely specific in a good way. Earl Grey winning over green tea was not on my bingo card. That was such a clean little data humiliation for our assumptions. And that is the bigger point, right? Food science keeps surprising us. Matcha sounds impressive, partly because it is the whole leaf, not just an infusion. So you get more polyphenols, more fiber, more of the plant itself. And apparently that can help the gut, metabolism, and inflammation all at once. Though I do love that he casually admits he invested in a matcha company. That was such a producer note moment, like, by the way, I own this too. At least he said it out loud instead of pretending to be spiritually neutral. But even then, the logic was not just matcha is magic. It was that better defenses plus better metabolism can lower overall risk. Right. And he kept connecting that back to immunity and blood vessels. That angiogenesis section was where he got fully in the weeds. In the best way. Because he actually made the body sound like infrastructure. 60,000 miles of blood vessels inside one adult is absurd. That is highway system language, not biology language. And the point is those vessels feed everything, good or bad. So when tumors recruit blood supply, the body's own system gets hijacked. Which sounds elegant until you remember it is literally feeding cancer. What I liked was the distinction between healthy growth and pathological growth. Because the body still needs blood vessels in the right places. And that is where the Goldilocks idea actually makes sense. Not too much, not too little, just enough blood vessel chaos to survive. That sentence should not work, but it does. The food chart was basically his proof that food can act like medicine. Green tea, onions, garlic, grapes, strawberries, all showing anti-angiogenic effects. He was genuinely like, foods have potency like drugs. And that is a pretty big conceptual shift if you think about it. Because drugs take years and huge money, food is just already there. Exactly, and that immediacy is what makes the idea powerful. Then he got into the fear people have that these foods might overdo it. Like if soy or artichokes slow vessel growth, do they harm healthy tissue too? And his answer was basically no, because the body regulates itself. The body is the obsessive gardener here, not the food. The golf course analogy was pretty good, I will give him that. Prune the ugly parts, preserve the fairway, do not destroy the whole yard. That made the system feel less like a blunt weapon and more like editing. Which is why the whole conversation on cancer felt more hopeful than scary. Even when the stories were painful, especially the family stories. His honesty about losing his uncles changed the whole temperature. Doctors can diagnose, but sometimes they still feel powerless. That is the part people do not talk about enough. Then his mother's story showed what changed once immunotherapy arrived. Stage 4 to stage 0 is not a casual sentence. And the point was not miracle cure, it was that the immune system can be awakened. Diet was part of making her body more ready for that fight. Which is honestly the most useful version of this whole episode. Not food instead of medicine, but food helping medicine work better. That is a much more grown-up claim and a much more believable one. It also makes you think about prevention in a less dramatic way. Like if the body is constantly fixing tiny damage, maybe help it do that. Which is a far better plan than waiting until everything is on fire. Unfortunately, humans love waiting until the dashboard is smoking. And this episode was basically a reminder that the dashboard matters. All right, we are going to stop there before we start prescribing tea. Though honestly, a little more glassware in the kitchen is not the worst idea. Next time, we get into how these immune-boosting strategies get even smarter. Episode 3 is where this starts feeling even more futuristic. Welcome back. This episode gets into food as medicine and the body's defense systems. And somehow microplastics turn a tea break into a full existential crisis. Which is rude because tea was trying to help us. The wild part is the idea that cancer is not just random chaos. It's tiny mutations happening all the time, and the body usually cleans them up. Then the defenses get overwhelmed, distracted, or damaged. So the body is not failing from one villain, it's losing 1,000 small fights. Exactly, and that changes the whole conversation around prevention. Because then food, exercise, sleep, all of that stops sounding like wellness fluff. It starts sounding like maintenance on a very expensive machine. The microplastics part is where it gets uncomfortable fast. A spoon's worth of plastic in the brain is an insane sentence. Humans really did invent packaging and then inhale the receipts. And it's not just one place, right? It's the brain, bloodstream, even reproductive tissue. That's what makes it feel less like a weird side fact and more like a system-wide exposure issue. And if inflammation is part of the story, that becomes even messier. Right, because now you're not just asking what entered the body. You're asking what it did once it got in there. The easy wins were almost boringly practical, which I loved. Throw out the plastic cups, the plastic plates, and the plastic silverware. Very glamorous health advice. Basically become a person from a better picnic. But that is the point, right? Small swaps beat dramatic panic. And then he went after tea bags like they were undercover agents. which is hilarious because tea always feels so innocent. But the bag itself can shed microplastics, so the ritual is not as clean as it looks. The bigger lesson there is not never drink tea. It's pay attention to what the tea is actually coming in. The modern world has made us suspicious of leaves in a bag, which is honestly fair after everything we've seen. I also liked the part where he admitted green tea was not automatically the champion. Earl Grey beating green tea is the kind of fact that annoys everyone a little, especially the people who built their personality around matcha. They heard bergamot and immediately lost the argument. But that's the point. Food medicine works best when you stop worshiping labels. You look at ingredients, not just vibes. And matcha itself sounded genuinely interesting because it's not just steeped tea. It's the whole leaf, ground up, with more of the useful compounds staying with you. That makes it more like eating the plant than borrowing from it for a few minutes. The claim that it can help with breast cancer stem cells is where people need to slow down, though. Because the point is not drink this and you're cured. It's that these compounds can support the body's anti-cancer defenses in multiple ways. Better immunity, better blood vessel control, maybe less room for tumors to get comfortable. Tumors really are the worst tenants. They move in, steal resources, and start remodeling the place. The colorectal cancer section hit hard because it made the anatomy feel too relevant. Starting in the mouth and running all the way down to the colon makes the gut story feel massive. And if processed meats sit in that system every day, that's not a small exposure. That World Health Organization link to carcinogens is not exactly subtle. No, and it makes the everyday pattern matter more than the occasional hot dog. The body can forgive a lot less drama than people think. Then angiogenesis comes in, and suddenly the body has this whole blood vessel economy. 60,000 miles of blood vessels is just absurd. That's not anatomy, that's infrastructure. And the idea that blood vessels can be both protective and dangerous is the whole nuance. You need them to feed healthy tissue, but not to feed cancers. That Goldilocks idea was actually a great way to put it. Not too much, not too little, just the right amount. Which is weirdly the opposite of modern life in every category. The experiment where food powders were tested like drugs was the real pivot. Because that's where the whole food as medicine idea stops being poetic and starts being measurable. Green tea, onions, garlic, red grapes, strawberries, all showing anti-angiogenic effects. That's a crazy sentence if you grew up thinking medicine and dinner were separate worlds. Still, I like that he kept stressing the body won't be starved by eating these foods. That's the fear people always jump to, like the body is one giant tug of war. But the body seems smarter than that. It protects the healthy vessels and blocks the bad ones. Basically, your body is a better gardener than most humans are with actual gardens. Honestly, yes, it knows where to mow and where to let things grow. And then the family story made all of it feel less abstract. The part about not being able to save his uncle was rough. Because you can hear how much of medicine is still about timing and limits. But the shift with his mother, that was the emotional center for me. Immunotherapy, waking up her own immune system is such a powerful image. Like the body had the army already, it just needed the alarm to go off. And the fact that diet was adjusted alongside treatment made the whole thing feel integrated. Not magic, not one heroic fix, just multiple levers pulling in the same direction. That is the part people ignore because it is less cinematic than a miracle cure. But it may be the real future, especially when paired with immunotherapy. And if a 90-plus-year-old is still healthy and cancer-free, that story sticks with you. Also, tea garden grandma or tea garden uncle energy is undefeated. Fresh air, movement, social connection, tea, sunrise, that's a brutal longevity combo. It all comes back to the same theme, though, which is resilience. Not just fighting disease after it starts, but keeping the system less vulnerable in the first place. That feels like the real thread of this episode. All right, we are going to leave it there before we start arguing about tea bags in court. Though honestly, glass cups and less plastic do sound pretty good. Next up, the conversation gets even more futuristic and a little more surprising. Episode 3 is where the body starts sounding like an upgradable system,